We're now checking the next to last assignment of the year. And by the way, before anyone has had a chance to complain about the assignment, because I just posted the assignment about an hour ago, yeah, there were some things in here that were a little challenging, some things that were not represented in the examples because the book writers and I are trying to get you to think things through for yourselves. Not everything is always going to be easy for you. All right, let's dive in. The quadratic formula, here we go. There it is in all of its beauty. X equals inverse b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Let's use it. So for number 2, if x equals inverse b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, then what do we have? X is inverse of b, there's b, but watch out, b is negative 6. So the inverse of b becomes positive 6. Yes, thinking for yourselves here, yes. The opposite of b, but b is negative 6. That becomes positive 6 plus or minus square root of b squared. Is that negative 36? Oh, of course not. Negative 6 squared is positive 36 minus 4 times 1 times negative 4. I warned you about that. Minus 4 times 1 times negative 4 becomes plus 16. Because we're subtracting 4 times a positive times a negative. That becomes plus 16. All over what? All over 2 times a. A is 1, so we have all over 2. We simplify that, and we have 6 plus or minus square root of what? 52 over 2. But folks, yeah, we need to simplify that 52. Anyone who plays cards knows that 4 goes into 52 13 times. So this is 4 times 13. The 4 goes pa-ching, pops out as a 2. So we've got 6 plus or minus 2 square root of 13 over 2. Do I expect you to reduce the fractions? Sure I do. If these can both be divided by 2, then you must do it. It becomes 3 plus or minus square root of 13, as you can see here in my answer. We move on to number 4. So we have x equals inverse b. That'll be a positive 2. Plus or minus square root of b squared. That'll be 4. Minus 4 times 1 times negative 15. Minus 4 times 1 times negative 15 becomes plus 60. Oh, that'll be nice. All over 2 times a. 2 times 1. What's that give us? 2 plus or minus square root of 64 over 2. That'll be 2 plus or minus 8 over 2. Well, now we figure out our two answers. 2 plus 8 divided by 2 would be 5. 2 minus 8 divided by 2 would be negative 3. We get answers of 5 and negative 3. Voila. Number 6, x equals inverse b. That'll be a positive 7 plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times, now that I'm looking for my c value, I realize, whoa, it's on the wrong side. We need to move that 30 to the other side. May I use my eraser to do so? We'll just put a minus 30 equals 0, and we continue on. So we have our inverse b plus or minus square root of b squared, that's 49, minus 4 times a times c. That's going to be plus 120 because it was minus a negative. All over 2 times a, which is just plain 2. Simplifying this, what do we have? 7 plus or minus square root of 169. Oh, that's convenient because we know the square root of 169. It's 7 plus or minus 13 over 2. Now we figure out our actual final two answers, and we have 7 plus 13 divided by 2 is 10. And we have 7 minus 13 is negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. We get 10 and negative 3, sure enough. And we go on to number 8. Here I've written the formula for you. Oh, by the way, it happens to be m not x. Details, details. Do we really care? No. But I figured I'd go ahead and make this correct and put m instead of x. It's all the same thing. So what's b? b is 3. So I'll take that b out and make it into a 3. I'll make that b into a 3 also. What's a? a is 5. So we'll change that a into a 5. And we'll change that c into a, be careful, the c is a negative 2. Negative 2. All over 2 times a, but a is 5. And we're off. We just changed b into a 3. We changed b into a 3. We changed a into a 5. We changed c into a negative 2. And we changed a into a 5. Now it's just doing the math. Doing the math. Tell you what, I'm going to save all of us the time here. By the way, this negative times a negative is going to become a plus. We do the math, and we end up with two answers. They are 2/5 and negative 1. 2/5 and negative. You know, because of that fraction, I was going to try to save some time here, but because of the fraction, let's go ahead and do this guy. We have negative 3 plus or minus square root of, that's 9 plus 40, right? Yep, 9 plus 40, that's going to be 49. That's convenient. We like perfect squares. All over 10. That gives us negative 3 plus or minus 7 over 10. And that gives us, well, negative 3 plus 7 is 4. 4/10 is 2/5. Then negative 3 minus 7 is negative 10. Negative 10 divided by 10 is negative 1. We get our 2, not 1, but 2 answers. Number 10. Again, this time the variable is u, so I changed this to a u. No big deal. And let's just plug in our numbers. Oh, before we do that, we need to rearrange this. There's no 0 on one side. So we need to rearrange that equation. Let's just do it right over here. We're going to subtract 18u and add 6. So we'll have 3u squared minus 18u plus 6 now equals 0. I subtracted 18u, I added 6, and now we have 0 over there. So let's get rid of this so we aren't tempted to look at the wrong thing. All right, so what's b? b is a nice big ugly negative 18. So we change the sign. The opposite of negative 18 becomes positive 18. I'm not going to worry about the sign here. It's just 18 squared because either way it's going to become positive, right? Then a is 3. c is 6. We get some nice big ugly numbers this time. And a is 3. And to save some time, I'm not going to do the math this time. We end up with 3 plus or minus square root of 7. That would imply that it used to be, what? It used to be 18 plus or minus 6 square root of 7 over 6. And this reduced to 3. This reduced to a 1 square root of 7. Where did 6 square root of 7 come from? Oh, it must have come from square root of 36 times 7, whatever that is. So that's kind of an ugly one to work with, but hey, it's doable. On the test, would I give you one with nasty numbers like that? No, I would not do that to you on a test. You don't have time on a test to mess with things like 18 squared and subtracting whatever that is and getting something that's got to be, oh, that's just really nasty. I would not do that to you on a test. Number 12. All right, just reviewing various parts of the problem as we go along here. What is a? A is 1. What is b? B is also 1 this time. What is c? C is 2. We plug in our numbers and we're off. So x equals what? X equals inverse b. That's negative 1. plus or minus the square root of b squared, that's 1, minus 4 times a times c, that's going to be minus 8, all over 2 times a, which is 2. That gives us negative 1 plus or minus square root of negative 7, over 2. We can't leave that negative sign in there, it's got to pop out. Pop out its I. Ka-ching! We have negative 1 plus or minus I square root of 7 over 2. And that should be what I have down here. Yes, it is. Good. Number 14. 14, some of you I'm sure looked at 14 and said, we never said blah. Exactly what some of you said. So what do we do? Let's clear the denominators. This is, believe it or not, old stuff. It's a concept that some of you never caught on to because you thought it was too much trouble and you never learned how to do it. And you proved that to me on the old test, whatever chapter that was. Yes, let's clear out the denominator. How? What's the LCD of all these denominators? X squared. Let's multiply both sides of the equation by x squared. Why? Because that'll make all of our nasty denominators just go away. What do we have? X squared times 1. Here the x squareds cancel, so we have plus 5. Here, one of the x's cancel, that leaves us with 2x. Let's subtract 2x from both sides. We have x squared minus 2x, bring down the plus 5, and now it becomes a very ordinary problem. X equals inverse b, that'll be a positive 2, plus or minus square root of b squared, that's 4, minus 4 times a times c, 4 times 5, that'll be 20, it's going to be negative, all over 2 times a, that's going to be 2, that gives us 2, plus or minus square root of negative 16, over 2. Alright, what do we do with a square root of negative 16? We change that into a 4i. 2 plus or minus 4i over 2. Well, if we can divide both of these by 2, then we must do it. That gives us 1 plus or minus 2i. 1 plus or minus 2i, correct. And we move on. This one doesn't look bad. Okay, so we have inverse b, that'll be a positive 4, plus or minus square root of b squared, that's going to be 16, minus 4 times 1 times 5, that's minus 20, all over 2 times 1. That's it. We're just filling in blanks. We're just filling in blanks and then simplifying. 4 plus or minus square root of negative 4 over 2. That'll be 4 plus or minus, this becomes 2i. 2i over 2, but we reduce our fractions. That'll be 2 plus or minus 1i. 2 plus or minus I. Ta-da! This guy, of course, we got to move the 6x to the other side. X squared minus 6x plus 13 equals 0. And we dive in. There's nothing unusual about this. I'm not going to bore you by going through all the details again. Let's just jump down to the correct answer, which ends up being 3 plus or minus 2i. 3 plus or minus 2i. It must have started off life as 6 plus or minus 4i over 2. Because I can see that the 2a value would be 2. So it started off like that, then you reduce your fraction. 3 plus or minus 2i, and we're done. Number 20, getting close to the end. Again, we've got to rewrite this as h squared minus 6h plus 4 equals 0. And then we dive in. Inverse b, that's positive 6 plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, that'll be minus 16, all over 2 times 1. And we have 6. We could do this in our sleep. No big deal, right? We end up with 20 over 2. We got to simplify the radical. 4 times 5. Pa-ching! 6 plus or minus 2 square root of 5 over 2. Reduce your fraction. We have 3 plus or minus 1 square root of 5. 3 plus or minus square root of 5. Done. 22. Some of you may have looked at that and said, we've never done one like this before. Oh, come on. Let's multiply this out. 4x plus x squared minus 3x. And then let's put it in a more familiar form. Oh, this is interesting, because c is going to end up being 0 if I copied that correctly from the book. So we have what? X squared. Now let's add our 4x and minus 3x. It's going to be a plus x equals 0. There's no c. So a is 1, b is 1, and c is, lo and behold, 0. Don't let that throw you. Now I'm hoping I copied it from the book correctly. I'm not going to bother checking. I'm assuming it's right. So we have x is inverse b, that's negative 1, plus or minus square root of b squared, that's 1, minus 4 times a times c, that'll be minus 0. Forget that. All over 2 times a, and we have what therefore? Square root of 1 is 1. Don't forget that. Some folks forget that. The square root of 1 is 1. Because 1 times 1 is 1. So we have negative 1 plus or minus 1 over 2. What's that do to us? Well, negative 1 plus 1 is 0 over 2. One of your answers is 0. Then negative 1 minus 1 is negative 2 over 2. We get two answers there, 0 and negative 1. There they are. It's so satisfying when you see that your answer was correct. Even for me. 24. One last opportunity. There's that thing of beauty. X equals inverse b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Plug in the numbers. Inverse b would be a negative 1 plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times 3 times 2 minus 24 all over 2 times a, that's 6. Simplify. Negative 1 plus or minus square root of negative 23 over 6. But you know, who cares if it's because all we have to do is pull out the I and we're done. Negative 1 plus or minus pa-ching, I square root of 23 over 6. It's over. Negative 1 plus or minus I squared, did I say 20? Yeah, 23 over 6. We're done. That's that. Your review assignment in preparation for the Chapter 8 mini-test. Why mini-test? Because we've only done 2 sections in this chapter. So we'll call it a mini-test. It won't necessarily be short. It just won't cover very much material. And we haven't done much, and so this should be an easy grade. 374, numbers 1 through 10, all, and 12 through 15, all. Okay, there you have it. Let's see. Oh, and there it is. One more time to let you just soak in its wonder and beauty. X equals inverse b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. Isn't it beautiful? The quadratic formula. And that is it for the year, except for the review assignment and the test. It's kind of sad. All good things have to come to an end. Farewell.